Right, let's talk about higher education. Specifically, let's talk about Remus College, a place that, on the surface, looked like any other small, slightly dusty institution of learning. You know, the type ivy-covered brick buildings, a library that smells faintly of old paper and regret, and students wandering around in hoodies looking perpetually tired. But beneath that veneer of academic normalcy, Remus College was, to put it mildly, a bit of a dumpster fire. A dumpster fire fueled by secrets, bizarre decisions, and an administration that seemed to be operating on a completely different planet. This wasn't just a college. It was a long-running, low-budget soap opera. And trust me, the plot twists are genuinely staggering. Every college has its quirks, its little traditions and inside jokes. But at Remus, the quirks were less charming campus legend and more symptom of a deep systemic problem. The strangeness started at the very top, with a president who ran the institution less like a modern university and more like a medieval fiefdom. Information was currency, and secrets were hoarded like gold. The campus wasn't just a place for learning, it was a complex web of whispers and unofficial power structures. If you wanted to know what was really going on, you didn't ask a dean. Oh no. You asked a custodian because they were the ones who truly had their fingers on the pulse of the place, and they knew where all the metaphorical bodies were buried. This environment of secrecy created a truly unique atmosphere. It was a place where rumors spread faster than the flu during finals week and where official announcements were often treated with the same level of skepticism one might reserve for a pop-up ad promising a free iPad. The students and a handful of dedicated, long-suffering faculty members were caught in the middle of it all, trying to get or give a legitimate education, while the leadership engaged in behavior that would make a reality TV producer blush. It was a masterclass in mismanagement, a glorious spectacle of how not to run anything, let alone a place responsible for shaping young minds, and it all revolved around one man, the president. The story of Remus College is a cautionary tale. It's a story about what happens when oversight disappears, when one person is given too much power, and when the mission of an educational institution gets lost in a fog of personal whims and paranoia. For years, the bizarre happenings were chalked up to simple eccentricity. "Oh, that's just how things are here," people would say with a shrug. But as we'll see, it wasn't just eccentricity. It was a slow-motion catastrophe, and the fallout would eventually shake the very foundations of the college, exposing a level of scandal that no one could have possibly imagined. So, buckle up, because we're about to take a tour of Remus College, and it's going to get bumpy. At the heart of Remus College's dysfunction was its president, a man who seemed to be locked in a personal, losing battle with the 21st century. His defining characteristic was a profound, almost comical fear of technology. We're not just talking about being bad at email. This was a deep-seated technophobia. Computers were mysterious, threatening boxes of black magic. The internet was a lawless digital wasteland. And Wi-Fi? That was just suspicious radio waves, floating in the air, probably stealing your thoughts. In a world where education was becoming increasingly digital, the president of Remus College was determined to keep his campus firmly planted in the age of paper and ink. This fear had tangible and frankly damaging consequences for the students and faculty. The creative arts programs, which rely heavily on modern software and digital tools, were utterly starved of resources. Imagine trying to learn graphic design on a computer that was probably last updated when the Backstreet Boys were still topping the charts. Film students were working with equipment that belonged in a museum. The school was essentially telling its creative students, "We want you to build the future, but you'll have to do it with the technological equivalent of a hammer and a chisel." It was a recipe for obsolescence, crippling the very programs that should have been a source of innovation and pride for the college. Because of his distrust of all things digital, the president relied on a different kind of information network people. Specifically, he cultivated an unusually close relationship with the custodial and maintenance staff. These weren't just the people who fixed leaky pipes and emptied the trash cans, they were the president's eyes and ears on campus. They were his trusted confidants, his intelligence agency. They had access to every room, overheard every conversation, and saw everything. The president empowered them, giving them an outsized influence that bypassed the entire official administrative structure. This created a bizarre shadow government within the college where a janitor's report could carry more weight than a department head's formal request. This analog kingdom was, in a word, absurd. While other colleges were investing in smart classrooms and online learning platforms, Remus College was investing in gossip, The administration was more concerned with who was saying what in the faculty lounge than with the school's declining academic reputation. This created a climate of paranoia and suspicion. Teachers felt watched, and students knew that the official channels were often useless. The president's fear of technology didn't just hold the school back, it actively warped its culture, turning a place of learning into a hotbed of intrigue and mistrust, all orchestrated by a man who preferred a whispered rumor to a well-formatted email. Now let's talk about academics at Remus College, or what passed for them. In this strange kingdom, there was one surefire way for a student to succeed, and it had nothing to do with studying, attending class, or understanding the material. The ultimate key to academic success was a good, convincing sob story. Yes, you heard that right. If a student was failing a class, they didn't need to hit the books. They just needed to march down to the administration office, find a sympathetic ear, and spin a tale of woe. It could be a sick pet, a difficult breakup, a vague personal crisis. The details didn't matter as much as the performance. Once the story was delivered with sufficient pathos, the administration would spring into action. A call would be made to the professor, who would be strongly encouraged to change the student's grade. It wasn't a request, it was a directive from on high. This policy effectively neutered the faculty. What was the point of setting academic standards when they could be overturned by a well-timed theatrical performance? It made a mockery of the grading process and sent a clear message to students. Your effort in the classroom is less important than your ability to cry on cue in an administrator's office. The entire system was fundamentally broken. This had a predictable and corrosive effect on the classroom environment. Why would any student bother to do the work? The smart ones, or perhaps the cynical ones, quickly figured out the game. Attendance dropped. Assignments were turned in late, or not at all. The very concept of a deadline became a joke. Classes became less about serious academic inquiry and more about just showing up, or not, and waiting for the inevitable grade change at the end of the semester. It was a system that rewarded mediocrity and punished both the students who tried hard and the teachers who wanted to maintain a semblance of integrity. For the professors, it was an impossible situation. They were caught between their professional duty to uphold academic standards and the administrative pressure to pass everyone. Many became demoralized, seeing their authority completely undermined. They were reduced to glorified babysitters, unable to fail students who clearly hadn't earned a passing grade. This created a cycle of apathy. If the grades didn't matter, why should the teaching? Why should the learning? The art of the sob story didn't just make classes less serious, it poisoned the very purpose of the college, turning the pursuit of knowledge into a meaningless transactional sham. For years, the bizarre state of affairs at Remus College chugged along, a dysfunctional machine held together by habit and fear. But then, the architect of this strange kingdom, the president himself, fell ill. As his health declined, the already tenuous control he held over the campus began to slip. The whispers grew louder, and the cracks in the foundation of his administration started to widen into gaping chasms. The man who had micromanaged every aspect of the college through his network of loyalists was no longer at the helm, and the power vacuum he left behind created a sense of chaos and uncertainty. The fiefdom was beginning to crumble. The president's eventual death was the catalyst that triggered a complete and total meltdown. It was as if a spell had been broken. The moment the news became public, something extraordinary happened. A mass exodus. Key members of the administration and staff, the same people who had been the president's closest allies and enforcers, vanished. They didn't just resign, they evaporated. One day they were there, running their little corners of the college, and the next, their offices were empty. It was a silent, coordinated disappearance that was both shocking and deeply suspicious. Honestly, it was the kind of thing you see in a spy movie, not at a small liberal arts college. This sudden departure of the old guard was a massive red flag. Why would so many people, many of whom had been at the college for decades, leave so abruptly and in unison? It suggested they knew something was about to be uncovered, and they wanted to be as far away as possible when the skeletons started tumbling out of the closet. Their hasty retreat left the remaining faculty and students in a state of bewilderment. The people who had held all the institutional knowledge, or at least all the secrets, were gone, leaving behind a mess of epic proportions for someone else to clean up. The atmosphere on campus shifted overnight from one of controlled paranoia to one of open speculation. With the president gone and his lieutenants scattered to the winds, the stories that had only been whispered before were now being spoken out loud. The fear that had kept everyone in line had dissipated, and in its place was a growing sense of anger and betrayal. People started comparing notes, connecting the dots, and realizing that the weirdness they had experienced wasn't just isolated incidents of mismanagement, it was a pattern. The unraveling had begun, and it was about to expose a level of scandal that would tarnish the name of Remus College for years to come. With the old regime gone, the floodgates of scandal burst open. The interim administration, tasked with sifting through the wreckage, began to uncover the true extent of the former president's misconduct, and it was spectacular. First came the nepotism. It turned out the president hadn't just hired his friends, he had put his entire family on the payroll. Relatives with questionable or in some cases non-existent qualifications were placed in high-paying administrative positions. The college's top jobs were treated like family heirlooms, passed out to sons, daughters, and cousins, all funded by student tuition fees. It wasn't a college, it was a family business, and business apparently was good. But the hiring bonanza didn't stop with family. The president had also hired a number of other unqualified individuals, seemingly for personal reasons. The most shocking revelation was the discovery of hidden payments being made through the college's books. These weren't consulting fees or legitimate expenses. Financial records, once examined, showed that the college was secretly making child support payments to the mothers of the president's children. He was using the institution's funds as his personal piggy bank to cover his private obligations. This wasn't just unethical, it was a brazen misuse of money that was supposed to be for educating students. And then, there were the purchases. Oh, the purchases. The audit uncovered a series of truly bizarre and extravagant expenditures. The president had used college funds to buy a fleet of luxury cars, which were then stored in a garage and never used. Why? No one knows. Perhaps he was planning to start a very classy, very secret taxi service. He also bought expensive jewelry and other high-end items, all charged to the college. It was a shopping spree funded by the public trust, a testament to a man who saw no difference between the college's assets and his own personal slush fund. The scale of the financial abuse was breathtaking. Faced with this catastrophic financial mess and a PR nightmare, the college was forced to take drastic action to stay afloat. They began selling off assets, not just the unused luxury cars, but land and other properties owned by the institution. It was a fire sale, a desperate attempt to plug the massive hole that the former president's spending had blown in the budget. The big reveal was complete. The scandalous secrets of Remus College were no longer secrets. They were public record, a humiliating and infuriating story of greed, corruption, and a staggering abuse of power that had brought a once proud institution to its knees. After the storm of scandal, after the revelations of financial malfeasance and jaw-dropping nepotism, Remus College was left bruised, battered, and facing a profound crisis of identity. The trust between the institution and its students, faculty, and community was shattered. The place was a mess. It desperately needed a leader, not a king, and a vision, not a personal agenda. And so, with the dust still settling, the board announced the arrival of a new president. This new leader stepped onto a campus that was hungry for change, but also deeply skeptical, wounded by the betrayals of the past. The hope was palpable, but so was the anxiety. The new president's immediate task is, to put it lightly, monumental. It's not just about balancing the books or hiring qualified people. It's about rebuilding a culture from the ground up. It's about restoring faith in the very idea that Remus College is a place for learning and not a vehicle for personal enrichment. They have to prove that grades will be earned, not negotiated. They have to show that technology will be embraced as a tool for progress, not feared as some kind of digital demon. Every decision, every public statement will be scrutinized. They are not just managing a college, they are performing an exorcism of the ghosts of the old administration. So, what happens next? That is the multi-million-dollar question, isn't it? Can a college truly recover from such a deep and systemic rot? Can the new president undo years of damage and steer this ship away from the iceberg it was so clearly heading towards? The faculty who remained, the ones who weathered the storm, are hoping for a return to normalcy, for a focus on academics and student success. The students are watching, waiting to see if their tuition will finally go towards their education instead of funding someone else's lavish lifestyle. The potential for a genuine turnaround is there, but the path forward is fraught with challenges. This brings us to the end of our story, for now. The future of Remus College hangs in the balance. It stands as a stark reminder of what can happen when power goes unchecked and institutions lose their way. Will this be a story of redemption, a tale of how a community pulled itself back from the brink and built something better and stronger? Or will the scars of the past prove too deep to heal? The next chapter for Remus College has yet to be written. We can only watch and hope that it's a story of recovery and not a sequel to the tragedy we've just witnessed. And frankly, after all that, they deserve a happy ending.